As fans of a property, and especially a property such as Star Trek, we are used to seeing the best sides of the heroic characters. These are the people who guide us through the world of space exploration, political intrigue, military tactics, and the great beyond of the mind. We invest rather a lot in them, gambling that they won't let us down. When does a hero lose their status? Captain, later Admiral Jean-Luc Picard, is often held as an example of how to manage everything correctly, while still running a starship. He commanded the Stargazer, the Enterprises D and E, and would command the entire Romulan evacuation program, usually with a deft hand. There were mistakes along the way, of course. No commander alive has ever been truly perfect, and those who claim that they are lying. What qualifies for a list of worst things for Captain Picard? Are they overt actions of nefarious intent, or do they hit a little bit different for the consummate diplomat? Picard is a name that commands respect, but what of those times that it doesn't? When does following orders become a hollow excuse for inaction? And what of those officers under him that faced his wrath, or worse, his indifference? I'm Sean Ferry for TrekCulture, and here are the 10 worst things Captain Picard has ever done. Number 10. Let a planet die. Boral 2 was facing an extinction-level event by the 7th season episode of The Next Generation, Homeward. As captain of the Enterprise D, Picard was tasked with monitoring the event. Monitoring, but not interfering. Boral 2 contained a pre-warp civilization, fully sentient and intelligent, save for their lack of space travel capability. For this crime, they fell under the boot of the Prime Directive. Officially, Starfleet could intervene to save them, but they chose not to. Then, Lieutenant Worf's brother, Nikolai, was on the planet's surface as the disaster approached. He was working undercover so as not to arouse suspicions, and came to deeply care for these people. Upon meeting with Picard, he pled with the man to help save these people, whatever the cost. Picard, stalwart to duty, refused. Though Nikolai's actions following this refusal led to the salvation of that race, Picard's decision to uphold the Prime Directive would haunt him for years to come. It is fair to say that his decision to help the Baku stemmed directly from this incident, and perhaps the guilt of knowing he had chosen to save Sarjenka years before. Number 9. Repeatedly shut down Worf. This occurred so often that there are video compilations online showcasing the sheer number of times that Picard shut down his chief of security. Though most of these clips are played for comedy, there is something a little more damning in them. As a department head, Worf should be a trusted member of the crew. Instead, more often than not, he is told to be quiet by his captain. While Picard didn't use that exact terminology, in this case, the message couldn't be clearer. With the sheer number of times that Worf is told no, to wait, to hold, that Picard disagrees, that he feels Worf has suggested the wrong course of action, it could do nothing but leave an impression on the officer. This impression clearly weighed on the Klingon when he took up his post on Deep Space Nine and the Defiant. Worf quickly gained a reputation as somewhat inflexible, not least when he butted heads with Odo about how best to run security on the station. As Deep Space Nine was run very differently from the Enterprise, one could hardly blame the man for ending up in a tailspin. Though Picard almost definitely had no ill intent in constantly belittling his security chief, these are the moments that stick with a person in the years that follow. Number 8. Refuse to step down when clearly compromised. Star Trek First Contact is an example where technically everybody in this situation was right and everybody was wrong. Starfleet got the ball rolling here by ordering the Enterprise E to the Romulan neutral zone when the Borg decided to invade again, swiftly removing Picard from the battle. To Starfleet's credit, an army of counselors was probably advising them against having him near the fight. Could a former drone be trusted? At the same time, surely there was some security-minded admirals crying out for his expertise. The counselors will be proven correct when, after mere moments of hearing the battle over subspace, Picard orders the Enterprise to Earth, disobeying his commands. When they arrive, they make swift work of the cube, though the events that follow do little to improve the man's standing. Trauma, and particularly PTSD, are conditions that are still very much being studied 30 years after the script for First Contact was written, but the film quite accurately portrayed the way they compromised judgment. As the audience, we can see that there are clear warnings that Picard is not okay. However, he continues to command the ship. The argument that the ends justify the means, that the ship is saved and the Borg are defeated, will come as little comfort to those officers who were assimilated while under orders to stand their ground. Though it takes a few hard truths from both Worf and Lily Sloan to get through to him, Picard does have the wisdom to finally back down, proving that he has not been totally controlled by his emotions. Number 7. Had a relationship with a subordinate. When Nella Darren raised the lights in stellar cartography, sparks began to fly almost at once. Captain Picard had so rarely allowed himself the room to explore a romantic engagement with anyone, so this was something that could have been good for both of them. Alas, as it quickly became evident, their positions went against them. As the captain of a starship, Picard was responsible for everyone under his command. Therefore, it was his duty to attempt to remain impartial and somewhat removed. Part of the test to become a full commander was to see if said commander could order an officer to their deaths. How, then, could a captain order someone that they were involved with on a dangerous mission? While the pair began to develop their feelings for each other, the news quickly spread. Some were happy for them, such as Beverly. Some felt less than comfortable, such as Riker. As first officer, he was tasked with managing all of the departments. So when Darren came to him and even suggested that the captain would hear her if he didn't, the first obvious example of the problem rose its head. That is not to suggest that Darren would habitually abuse their relationship, but rather that there were certain assumptions that came with having the captain's ear. While that situation was quickly resolved, there followed the dangerous mission with the firestorms. Picard had to order Darren to hold her position, an order that could have resulted in her death, though she thankfully survived. It became apparent that the captain of a starship could not maintain an impartial relationship with his officers while also maintaining a romantic relationship with one as well. Though neither are truly to blame for this, Darren then transferred off the ship, losing an excellent career opportunity in the process. Number 6. Demeaning Wesley on the bridge for all to see. This is one of the stranger events in Picard's list. Though he was self-admittedly terrible with children, he was well aware of who Wesley was, having known Beverly for years. He brought the body of Jack Crusher home to the family, so young person though he was, Wesley was no simple stranger. With that, is that why Picard felt in a position to tell him to shut up in front of the entire bridge crew? During the show's first season, Wesley slowly earned a place on the bridge, usually by showcasing some new innovation that endeared him to the officers, while admittedly giving audiences pause. However, despite his brash child's nature, he became the butt of the joke. Picard, displaying a short temper that rarely came to the surface, barked at him to shut up, loud, in front of his mother. Wesley was almost immediately cowed. Unfortunately, the script decided to make the scene into a joke, as Crusher quickly defends, then also shuts him down. It is one of the least Picard-like moments of the character on screen, even if it did come so early in the Next Generation. Number 5. Abandoned Elnor. It would be easy to say that no one could have predicted the events of First Contact Day in 2385. Certainly, reprogramming all of the A500 synths to destroy the Utopia Planitia shipyards was perhaps out of the bounds of belief. But when one considers the events depicted in The Last Best Hope by Dr. Una McCormack, the warning signs were all there. First, there were many both within the Federation and indeed the Romulan Empire who weren't happy that the two great powers were working together. Then there were those Romulans who flatly refused to do anything, even as more and more evidence piled in around them that the supernova was imminent. Before the attack took place, only one world had successfully rehomed Romulan refugees, Vashti. There, the Coat Mulat, an order of Romulan nuns who practiced absolute candor, took up residence. They adopted a young boy, Elnor, and trained him in their ways. Picard came to love the boy, frequently visiting and bringing gifts. They had what promised to be a father-son relationship until the synth attack leveled Mars, and Picard was recalled to Earth. Whilst the events that followed that will be discussed in another entry here, one of the worst things that Picard did, pained as he was never going back for Elnor, leaving the boy wondering what it was that he had done wrong. When they eventually reunited, it was clear that the damage had been done, though Picard worked to repair what he could. Number 4. Resigned as a matter of pride. In the wake of the Mars attack, Starfleet made the decision to immediately halt the Romulan rescue mission. Their entire rescue armada of Wallenberg-class ships had been destroyed, with Starfleet going from one of the greatest powers in the quadrant to one that was now seriously resource depleted. Admiral Jellicoe informed Picard that the mission needed to be scrubbed. As it transpired, Jellicoe went to Picard first out of courtesy. Despite their less than friendly history, there was no malice in Jellicoe's orders, as was clearly shown when he addressed the rest of the Admiralty, Janeway included. That's where Picard's fatal flaw became truly apparent. When informed of the mission's ending, Janeway immediately set about establishing a pilot program, using the Protostars experiment to make sure the Quadrant knew that Starfleet was still about exploration and advancement. Contrast, when informed of that same order, Picard immediately threatened his resignation in protest. To his very great surprise, it was accepted. This was something he hadn't dreamed of, as he couldn't envision a situation where he wasn't a member of Starfleet. In the heat of the moment, tempers flared. However, when cooler heads prevailed, he very easily could have returned to service and worked with Starfleet rather than against them. For better or worse, he chose not to. Number 3. Abandoned Laris. In the second season of Star Trek Picard, it was revealed that Zhaban, one of the 2 former Tal Shiar agents who elected to live and work with Picard in the years following the supernova, had died. While the show barely lingered on this information for a moment, it effectively set the scene for Picard and Laris to begin a romantic engagement. It was a bit stop-start, but by the season's closing, it was clear that they were intent on making a go of things. The third season then revealed that Picard was finally leaving France and moving to Chalnok 4, at long last accepting his retirement, ready to settle down with Laris. Although, that isn't exactly what happened in the end. While they parted amicably, with the promise that Picard would join Laris once his current crisis was averted, there was something quite knowing in how she accepted this. It would be the last time that Laris was seen on screen. We don't want to be too harsh on Picard here. Beverly Crusher was calling and she badly needed his help. This was more than just one last adventure, as this was family, even if at that point he didn't realise how true that was. The true issue here is how quickly he elected to leave Laris and run back to his old life. He then doesn't mention her again, nor do any of his actions suggest he has returned to Chalnok to see her. Number 2. Held a pointless grudge for 30 years. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but so is having the wisdom and knowledge of a person's intent. Ro Laren was someone who Picard knew very well, so her defection to the Maquis shouldn't have come as big as a shock as it was, nor as the betrayal he inferred it to be. Being fair to Picard, one can be single-minded when in the mission, so much so that it's hard to see the wood for the trees. He was, however, more concerned with the mission than the person undertaking it. Ro was clearly affected by the plight of the settlers in the demilitarized zone and tried to tell him as much. He responded as a captain, not a confidant. This would come back to haunt him. 30 years would pass before he would encounter Ro again. She thankfully elected to return to Starfleet before the Demeaning alliance with the Cardassian Union, which definitely saved her life. There, she served her time, then worked her way back up the ranks once more. She confronted him on the Titan A, as even after all that time, it was the pain between them both that proved they were who they said they were. In those few moments they had together, they both saw the futility of the grudge that had kept them apart. If we strictly judge by what we saw on screen, then this would be the last time that they would interact. It may have been too little too late, but it was something at least. Number 1. After defending Data's rights as a sentient being, opposes his right to procreate. Though we know that Picard did in fact do the right thing in the end here, the offspring shows a surprising side to him. Consider the episode The Measure of a Man, where Picard passionately advocates for Data's right to be treated as any other sentient officer in the fleet, winning the day with his speech. One would think, then, that he would never question Data's right to autonomy, yet when Data returns to the ship with Lal, Picard is aghast. The argument is presented initially that Picard doesn't truly believe Data understands the enormity of his actions in creating Lal. Data responds, emotionless as he is, that all he has done was father a child, something that anyone aboard the ship should have the right to do without needing the permission of their captain or Starfleet. Picard continues his position, but is quickly swayed. Perhaps it is best to view this event as a minor slip, or an example of old prejudices popping back up without warning. We all, conscious or not, have them. It is our lot in life to attempt to grow beyond them. Picard certainly did, even if it was a rocky road to get there. That's everything for our list today, folks. Thank you so much. What do you think of our list? Do you reckon we were too harsh? Do you reckon we weren't harsh enough? Let us know in the comments below. You can catch us over on the socials at TrekCulture. I am at Sean Ferrick. You'll find me there as well. Until I'm talking to you again, have a wonderful time. Live long and prosper. Make it so. Thanks very much.